Today we're gonna go from this to this. Keep watching if you want to know how. Just like our full-size witch broomstick tutorial, you are going to choose at least 6 to 7 yarn skeins that you would like to work with. But this one, it also requires an additional material. We are cutting a 28-inch piece of grosgrain ribbon. The color of the ribbon doesn't matter, but the fact that it is grosgrain does. You want to make sure that you have a ribbon that will withstand being sewn on, because this is what we are applying our yarn to. So once we have all our lengths of yarn and some skeins in some carefully placed buckets or items that will help contain the tangle, we are going to walk this over to the sewing machine.
Okay, we have chosen to put the yarn in these little baskets. It helps it contain it more, so it speeds up the process as you're pulling out the yarn to do the sewing. The purpose of the ribbon is twofold. One, that's where the bristles are going to be attached, and it also ties around the container that you're putting your broom in. You're going to leave about 5 or 6 inches of that ribbon for the one end of the tie, and you're going to leave about 5 or 6 inches on the other end of this. So now we're going to start attaching the strands of yarn to make the bristles. The important thing to remember is the bristles need to be, the yarn needs to be twice as long as you want your bristles to be. So from the center ribbon to the left is the length of the bristle, from the center to the right is the other side of the bristle, because they are going to fold over.
And if you're struggling to visualize that, you will see good and well after we get all of our yarn sewn on. And speaking of yarn, extra tip is make sure you are keeping track of all of your yarn. You can see me pulling a purple yarn strand up here. You can add them later, but it looks better if you can gather them and sew them all together at once. So just make sure you're aware of where your strands are.
Got that anchored in at the back right there. You're going to continue on with the straight stitch. You're just going to pull that up a loop at a time. We usually went probably 3 or 4 lengths, and then you push that up underneath the presser foot. You don't want to lay it out strand by strand. You want to push that under so it's as thick as it possibly can be.
And that's how your broom is going to get the volume.
Exactly, exactly. And then I'm just going to sound another reminder. You're using a straight stitch and you're pulling out the yarn on both sides longer than you want your broom to be. So you're going to trim it off. So don't be skimpy on the yarn. Then just keep going along until you get to the other end. Stop about 5 or 6 inches before the end of the ribbon and backstitch.
Once you have cut your threads, you're going to keep this bristle mess on your sewing machine because we need to zigzag down that same grosgrain ribbon. But as you can see here, there's slight gaps in my yarn, and that's okay because they won't be shown, but make sure that you are really pushing this through. And speaking of pushing, you can do what I did and cut the thread and try and pull all the yarn back through your presser foot like a hard person, or you could do what Cheryl does in this clip and you hold down your needle and just turn it on the grosgrain and save yourself a lot of time. So you choose, but I picked the other way, which is why we have 2 different clips. Whichever way you pick, your goal is you are going to widen your zigzag and you are going to zigzag down the entire grosgrain ribbon to really make sure that that yarn is held in place. And remember, the grosgrain color doesn't matter, and neither does the thread, which is why it's contrasting here, because we wanted you to see, but neither of these will be shown in our final product. And this is what your bristles should look like when you are ready to move on to the next step. So we're gonna set these aside. Hi, Ashley here, just 1 second. Cheryl. We want to give away the broom that we're currently making because we're so happy that you're watching. So make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video to find out how.
All right, now we are going to construct the base for the broom. 2 things to remember are you can choose any container you want, glass or plastic. Just note that the glass containers are heavier, so you may need to weight the plastic bottle you use just so your broom doesn't tip over. The other thing is consider how tall your container is before you start making your bristles. So you want your bristles to be long enough to cover the entire container.
Ask us how we know that.
Yeah, Finally, consider the opening, how big it is. The smaller the opening, the better, because you want the sticks that you're going to put in for the broom to fit snugly. Also, the opening needs to have some sort of a lip that you can tie your bristles to. Now, as far as your sticks,
your goal is to find one that fits in the container hole that you want it to. Once you have the stick, especially if you're combining them like we are here, we used floral wire on both ends to help make sure they stay in place. But if your stick is one thick one, you will need to skip this step. Once your handle is ready, an important part is stabilizing it in your container. That's why we are taking hot glue and gluing it both around the opening and the handle. This is also why a narrow opening is really helpful. If you have a wider opening, I was sometimes sticking things like rocks in there to make sure that the handle was staying in the middle and gluing around that. The whole point of this step is to make sure that your handle does not leave the container. Once you have your bristles around the broom, you're done. You're never getting that handle back in. We just want to make sure it's centered where we want it and that it is in place when we start moving it around.
Here's the bristles. Now, this is the most technical part of the project, but don't run off.
Don't bail. You can
do
this.
It looks like a mess, but it's going to be gorgeous. So just follow our directions and you'll be just fine. So you've laid out your bristles. You're going to separate them now, the upper and the lower. So you're going to slide your finger along the stitching line in between the two and flip the ones up, so it will look like it looked when you were sewing it. That's what we want to get to that point. You will know when you've got them separated when you look along there and you can see your actual stitching line. So that's what we're trying to get to. Next, we will add the bristles to the base. So we need a big safety pin that you're going to put in the end of the ribbon and a little bit of tape. You're going to tape the safety pin to the bottle, so when you're at the other end, you will be able to find the other end of the ribbon to tie it off. It has a tendency to get lost. So it's an important step, unless you want to go finding the other end of the ribbon. So tape that down and then start rolling and rolling and rolling. Roll along the stitching line as the ribbon comes around the bottle. Make sure it goes down on the stitching line. Try and keep it as tight as you possibly can till you get to the end.
And at this point, you may be wondering why you just watched this video. That is definitely what I thought at this point of the first time doing this craft. I promise, trust the process.
All right, now we're going to tie the two ends of the ribbon together. So you're going to look through the yarn until you find the tape and the pin. Pull that up through the yarn and then tie it together with the other end. And as you're pulling that, try and pull that as tight as you can around the ribbon. Now, if by chance it doesn't meet exactly how you'd like it to be, that ribbon, the bottom ribbon, can be moved around the bottle a little bit, because the top part is going to fall over the bottom part of the yarn, much like the bottom half is like the petticoat and the top part is like the dress. So it will cover it over. So just get it tied in a knot and then you're going to stand it up.
And what a mess. Don't worry, it turns out. You're kind of going to treat this like hair now. You'll play with it, you'll line it up, you'll get it to where you want it to look before you tie something around it. If they're crisscrossed or puckered, that's how it's going to stay when it's tied. So you really want to take some time and feel your inner hairdresser, because you want to make sure that the yarn looks exactly how you want it before you do the next step. Keep with it. I promise you will have a moment where all of a sudden you go, look, it looks like a broom. And that's when you can get ready to move on. And now, just as with our larger broom, you can do this part yourself, but having two people is really nice. So we're going to take some yarn and tie it around the top to make the knot of our broom. And if you have someone to hold it in place, it tends to make it a bit poofier.
Okay, the best thing to do now is to pick up that bottle, put your hand up underneath, and with your fingers, straighten out those loops that might be caught up there. As you pull those out, you can start clipping those loops so that yarn will hang nice and straight. Finish out the bristles of your broom. Okay, now we are going to give our broom a haircut. You've got those strands laid out nice and straight, some of the loops cut. you're going to see that the yarn is much longer than the bottle. That's we did on purpose because we want to trim it so it will match the bottle. Big red warning, go slow, because once you trim that yarn off,
you're done.
It's like hair. It's not going to grow back, and you want it to be slightly longer than the bottle so the bottle doesn't show. So just go slow. Again, inner hairdresser, give it a haircut.
This is what we're talking about. The poof at the bottom is because the yarn is a little bit longer than the bottle. If you want it to sit perfectly flat, we're going to go back to the cutting table, literally. But if you are finished, now it's time for the decorating. For this, I just went to the local Dollar Tree, but you can use anything. You can use ribbons, buttons. Here you see me taking some bat rings, and I'm just cutting off the back before I hot glue them onto our broom. I also picked up a package of plastic skull ribbons, but they did not have a tie long enough to go around the width of our broom. So I applied some floral wire to the back before wrapping it around our broom to make sure it would stay in place. Once you have decorated it to your liking, you are finished.
These brooms have a long history. They started out as men's beards. I didn't want to waste the yarn, and I came up with this idea to make these little brooms. Ashley thought I was nuts.
I was just along for the ride because I knew that she has great ideas, but I had no idea what we were making.
But take heart, they do get messy, and then they get gorgeous. So make one, try it. It's great fun.
If you do, share it on our Instagram. We'd love to see it. Don't forget, if you like what you're seeing right now, hit the thumbs up. It helps us a lot. Thanks. The creative possibilities are limited by you because you can go tall, big. Look at this little baby broom. And that is our DIY tabletop Halloween brooms. And I'm sure you're interested, how do you win this yourself? This one's already taken.
This one I'm taking up the street to the neighbor who donated his pine tree limbs for our brooms.
Oh, see, just find a stick. That's your goal. Now, if you don't want to wrap and figure out the yarn by yourself, to enter, please answer the question, what was your favorite Halloween costume? Whether you've worn it, whether you've seen it, which one did you absolutely love? Enter that in a comment down below. You also have to be subscribed. Please subscribe to the channel. I will check because we are really trying to grow.
Yeah.
As far as timeline, I will close this in a week. I want to make sure this gets out before Halloween. And if you want to enter, again, please make sure you're subscribed. Answer the comment, what is your favorite Halloween costume? And we will contact you through the comments down below. We look forward to seeing your answers. And if you want to show a picture, you know our Instagram handle, and can't wait to see who wins.
Happy Halloween and good luck.